Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about You, Season 4, Episode 8. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, obviously after the last episode's reveal, we kind of rewind. And I thought it was so beautiful how it was shot too, because when Joe was remembering everything with Marianne, like when you got that flashback in episode 1, it was shot, the coloring was different, and now it's like bright and colorful. But maybe it's just my imagination. It seemed like the moment she started running from Joe, the color started fading from the screen in the regards of it got a little dimmer, but maybe that's just my imagination. But I thought that was interesting because it also kind of flows into like, right, it's all about perception. You know, that's the thing about like following a character, like getting a story from a character's perspective, that the problem with that is, God, what's the terminology for? I can't think of it, but basically it's like narrative bias. That the fact of the matter is, because you're getting the story from one perspective rather than all perspectives, it skews your view of the truth because you're only getting one person's side of the truth. And of course, someone's always going to skew the story. Like, I mean, regardless of the series, we can all recognize that Joe is a garbage human being, that he's obsessed and he's crazy. But once again, he's never been self-aware enough. He's had moments of self-awareness, which made some of the reveals in this episode. I'm like, is Joe on the cusp of full-blown self-awareness? It seems like it, but we'll get to that later. But it's like, yeah, he doesn't realize who and what. He's never realized it. And, you know, like I said, he's had small moments. I want to say season 2, after everything he had, you know, after the reveal with love and everything, I think he had moments. I think it clicked, but it didn't fully set in. But anyway, I also love how they changed the opening. The opening has stayed the same the entire show of the show's run, and this is the one episode they did it differently, because I was wondering if this is going to be a full Marianne episode, but it's like, no, but like, I'd say what, I don't even know, I'd go half. I'd say maybe like at least, I mean, maybe in totality, maybe like half the episode is about Marianne, the other half is about Joel and his realization. But the fact is that the opening was kind of like sketched like how she does sketches. I was like, that's so interesting. So things play out the way Joe made it seem like they played out. But I was like, oh, did Joe later on have a psychotic break? It's like, kind of in that moment he did. Basically, the moment he let Marianne go, he dosed her, grabbed her, and brought her to like, kind of like, oh, let's play house. I've taken you. I'm trying to fix everything. And while he's doing all that, sit with her, like he's dazed out watching stuff about Reese. And like, I was like, so this is when your mind started latching onto that. And he kept drugging her, trying to fix things. He put her in a cage because, you know, Joe's got to do Joe, right? And sadly, this one doesn't have any, because at least, wasn't it in the third cage in season 3 that he designed, because he's been in that situation where it's like, right, I've gotten locked in before, so the whole point was put in like some extra keys, just in case you get locked on the inside, you can easily get out. That was the whole point, but he didn't want to take the chance Marianne could get away, so it did not include that in case of glass break feature in this particular cage. But he accidentally ended up hurting her because she tried to take her opportunity to run. I think the opportunity would have been wait till he opened the door, push him in, close it, and then run. But she, sadly, you know, I mean, I think it's just like, right, the heat of the moment, you saw your opportunity and you try to take it. She ended up getting hurt, and that's what snapped. Because in his mind, he's like, no, I would never do anything to hurt Marianne. It's like, well, I'm sure you said the same thing about Candace. I'm sure you said the same thing about Beck. Now, you did hurt Candace. Granted, you didn't kill her. Love did. But you sure as hell killed Beck. So you weren't going to hurt her. Love, you ultimately ended up killing her. So, and I thought what was going to happen is that he was going to have such a psychotic break that when he snapped back to it, like when he became Reese, that he would have on a British accent and stuff, but he doesn't do that. It's just like, from the outside perspective, he just seems like cold and detached. Because Marianne could tell like something was off, like the fox, as she describes him, that Joe wasn't there anymore. There was someone else in the driver's seat. And I love how Reese kind of describes it, where it's like, oh, the fact of the matter is you needed a big bad. You needed to make yourself feel like the good guy. So you poured every bit of darkness in you and you put it in something else. You needed a boogeyman. You needed a bad guy to come after. And it's like, once again, because this whole season I talked about like, wow, we're getting a different side of Joe. And it's like, because he poured everything into this other, like it's his brain, his mind is divided between all the good him that he wants to be as Jonathan versus all the bad him that is all the bad of Joe is in Reese. And it's like you created this monster that you could go after, you know? And especially when he explained, like, why did he... It's like, yeah, Reese had given his reasons for killing them, but now we find out Joe's real reason. Joe killed Malcolm because, Malcolm was running his mouth off about Marianne. Had to kill him. Simon, you found out about what Simon was doing, taking advantage of young artists, so you killed him because you're like, right, he's a crappy person. And Gemma was close to figuring us out. And it's like, once again, when they lay it all out like that, you're like, oh my God. Once again, that's always the good part of a mystery, that all of it was there beforehand. Even Reese being like, no, anytime you and me ever talked, was there really ever anyone really around? Was anyone around responding to the fact that you were talking to me? It's like, no, we were always alone. He was like, no, Malcolm introduced me to you. It's like, did he? And you hear Reese say, Malcolm recommended I come over here and talk to you. It's like, and then like, it's like, after Simon's death, did I say something and no one responded? Didn't you happen to go out there on the balcony and kind of have this epiphany with me? You know, it's like, yeah, once again, it's that beautiful thing of a mystery. The clues were always there. It's just a matter of, I did not see that twist coming. I was like, that's a really, really good twist. Cause I was like, Reese being the killer, that's a nice twist. This is an even better twist, being like, no, it's all in his head. The real Reese, yeah, he's part, like the one time Joe interacted with the real Reese was at the funeral. He's like, when you nodded at him and he nodded back, it's because you were staring. That's the only reason why. He was probably thinking like, maybe you're someone that, maybe you're a fan of my work or something, or just, me and just kind of like what's up? Hey, it's like, that's all it was. That was the only time, other than the time you ended up killing him, but that was like that was your only introduction to Reese. Like you never met him. And Joe's obviously in complete and utter denial about it, because he's like, there's no way I would do this. And Reese is like, right, you know where Marianne is. It's simply a matter of accepting it. And are you willing to? I mean, first he had to get rid of the real Reese's body, which obviously Reese is a public figure that the moment he went missing, that became like obviously big news and stuff like that, especially because he was running for mayor and everything. But Reese's whole thing is about making Joe see himself for who he really is. And that's what I was bringing up before. I was like, wait, are we getting what I think we're getting? Are we getting a more self-aware Joe? It's about embracing what you are. Because he was saying, right, it didn't start with you like breaking like Marianne's arm and then like hurting her and smacking her head. It's like, no, it happened when you drugged her and kidnapped her. No, actually it happened the moment you killed your wife and left your son behind. It's all been building since then, and then just like you were already on the cusp of breaking. You already had issues, but that season 3 finale situation finally sent you over the edge, and it just took it a while before it finally completely spilled over into what we have right now, and you having a complete another psychotic break. And I think that's just such an interesting thing of the fact is that we do have a character where we literally get to hear your inner thoughts. And now it's like, hear your inner thoughts as you're challenging, like running up against yourself in this regard. So that's such a fascinating thing. And just when he has such good in his life, like Kate, is at the time that he's done something so disastrous that it's like, yeah, he was so obsessed with holding on to Marianne that, and it's like, but the argument could be, well, because of the whole psychoticness of you kidnapping Marianne, it put you in a circumstance where you wouldn't meet Kate. So not saying it's justified, like, that worked out. I'm like, it's just kind of a jacked up thing of like, it kind of worked out to your benefit in that regard. So, but not for Marianne, because it sucks. The fact is, she's got a potentially broken arm. Joe isn't Joe. Her attempts to try and kill him with kindness didn't work out. Now, if the Joe was still in his somewhat, I have to say, quote, what is considered normal for Joe, because I can't say his normal brain, because like Joe's mind isn't normal. He's off his rocker. Even before, he's just more off his rocker now than he normally is. At least he has some functionality of being off his rocker on a day-to-day basis when he's at his, once again, his normal, not what would be typically considered a more normal, I guess, to some extent. But nevertheless, if she had been able to reach out to like do that with Joe the Joe before like Reese kind of took over, then maybe she could have, but like Reese isn't like, nah, I'm just gonna leave you here, and then like when it's time for Joe to come find you and kill you and finally like embrace what he really is, recognize what he really is. And Marianne was stuck there the entire time because the entire time this is all happening, Joe's having his battle with Reese. Like it hadn't quite started at that point in time yet. Well, it has been a little bit of time because it turns out by what Reese says, the last time he checked on Marianne was before they went to the hammy. So what was that, episode 4? Like episode 4, and then, you know, once again we don't know like. Cause we know, like, at one point in time, there was, like, a week time skip between, like, I think episode 5 and 6. So, who knows how long Marianne was in there. Ran out of water, ran out of food. And especially because the only thing holding on to her sanity was getting back to her daughter. Especially because she kept telling the story over again. Like, once upon a time, it's like, thinking about her daughter, like, telling her this story. And just like, oh, it's not going to work. But her daughter's like, no, you're strong. Because Joe gave her some stuff to help with the pain, but the problem is it would have sent her spiraling down like her drug situation in the first place, because that's the reason why she was like, that's why I nearly lost you in the first, not nearly, I straight up lost you in the first place. I'm not going to undo all the hard work, and I'm going to do everything I can to get back to you. I'm not going to lose myself in the process, because that's not going to do you any benefit. And especially because Marianne made a promise to her, like, I'll come back in a couple days. I'll never leave you. And now she's like, she's scared her daughter's going to think she abandoned her, you know? I mean, it already sucks because, like, wasn't Marianne's, like, ex, wasn't that her daughter's father? I haven't seen season 3 in a while, so I don't remember. But, I mean, I know Joe killed him and made it look like a robbery or whatever, but I want to say that was her baby, that was, like, her daughter's dad, if I remember correctly, because that was the whole custody situation, but nevertheless. So it's like, yeah, all she has is, like, her mom, and now, you know, so that's enough to drive her insane, and she's losing her mind. She can't even focus on the once upon a time she can't even tell that. So like she sadly, like, her hope has been broken because she doesn't think there's any way out until Nadia shows up, and Nadia's willing to let her out, but it's like, no, you can't. Joe might get an alert about it. Like, the fact is, give me a little food, water. It's like, we got to find a way. You can't call the cops. He's done this before. He's gotten away. He stalked me halfway across the world. He killed his wife, and he got away with all that. He'll just do it again. So we can't let him know we're onto him. You can't let him know that you're onto him, because if you do, Nadia, he will kill you. And I love that while Nadia, you know, goes to class, try to pretend everything is normal, the fact of the matter is, Reese is like, oh, you liar, Nadia, pants on fire. Like, he knows that she's, but Joe's unwilling, because and that's to show the difference, whereas Reese is kind of like the cold, logical, being like, yeah, I know what's going on here. She's definitely lying. Whereas Joe wants to give her the benefit of doubt when she's like, yeah, me and Edward, you know, it's like, oh, craziness. And, you know, things are awkward. I don't know how to really define us. You know, we're not really label people. But you can tell, like, she does flinch a little bit when Joe touches her, and I thought he would have, like, picked up on it, but I don't think he did. So, but like I said, the real, like, revelation of, once again, finding out that figuring it out ultimately that he was the one, having to accept the fact is he is the one that did this to Marianne. No one else did. It was him, and the sad realization, like, you see him kind of tearing up, and Reese being like, oh, good on you for finally acknowledging it. But it's like, he had made this reference, because Reese had said, like, compared Joe to Dawn. It's like, oh yeah, Dawn thought her obsession made her think her and Phoebe were something else, to the point that she was even going to put, like, you know, soul sisters on her arm and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, it didn't go to the point of accidentally killing. Oh, he's like, sorry, I'm not talking about Don anymore, am I? And that term that I can't think of the term off the top of my head, but it's the term that basically means someone who is, like, delusional and obsessed with a celebrity or something. They've said the word twice, but I can't never remember the word. And Reese kind of implying that Joe has it. And it's like, well, because I kind of forget that they weren't necessarily, like, full-blown celebrities, but they are, like, each one of his people he's going after have been people from rich situations and celebrity-ish with just enough of a font. Like, Beck came from a rich family, Love came from a rich family, and stuff like that. So it almost feels like, you kind of have, once again, you have a type. So it almost makes parallels of like, once again, the whole point of like, right, Dawn didn't realize she had an issue. Once again, that's why I talked about in that episode, like, oh, it's a little hypocritical. You're jumping down Dawn's throat because you're not willing to realize. I brought up Peach as well. It's like, oh, she's obsessed with Beck. And he's like, oh, I got to protect Beck from this obsessed person. She's so twisted. She thinks there's something going on between you when there's not. Once again, not self-aware enough, but this whole point was about self-awareness. Because I even love that it's like, all right, you're getting warmer. Oh, you found that key. I wonder what's that key go to? Warmer, warmer. And he picks up the book, Reese's book, and it's like, oh, Nadia gave you that. Sadly, Nadia didn't realize she was giving it to the Reese's #1 fan. And he already had the book, and he had like stuff already like bookmarked and stuff like that. And one of the pages was like scrolled out and it said, "Hi, Joe," because Reese had said like, oh, you probably imagined all those text messages. Now, part of me wonders, could it be that was this like manifested Reese subconscious leaving all that for him? Or like all those messages, were they like almost like newspaper clippings, like when you kidnap someone, like the news. I mean, I say that like, oh, you've got experience, but we've watched enough shows, and sadly there was enough real life stuff to know like that is a thing of like, oh, like take newspaper clippings or like magazine pieces and like use that as a messaging thing. Like you put on a piece of paper, like the letters from a magazine or newspaper or whatever. And I wonder, is that what the text messages were? Because it's like, oh, "Hi, Joe" was like the only thing highlighted on that page. Could it be that every message he had with quote unquote Reese was actually through that same process? I don't know. But it's like, yeah, like he became obsessed. His new the person he was stalking past Marianne was Reese. He became obsessed with Reese. It's like, oh yeah, this is something, like you were following him everywhere. And yeah, that's why like when Nadia found that picture of Joe at that place, I was like, Did not also realize that place was the place he took Kate like last episode. And it turns out, because that was Reese's favorite place, even though Kate was like, oh yeah, this food here is god awful and this is your like local haunt. It's like, it's not his, it's Reese's local haunt that he became obsessed with and everything. And once again, the typical way he goes, once again, they keep changing this season into because I keep talking about it, like how every season Joe kind of changes, like the show's like changes its ways. And this season they went with the double change because it's like, all right, it's good Joe, he's not doing his typical stalking thing, he let Marianne go, he's kind of, he's in the middle of a murder mystery. Then it turns out, as he kind of says, like a Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing going on this season. And now it's like you shifted the season again. It's like it's splitting up into two parts benefited the story in that regard. It's like I don't think it was intentional. I feel like they probably took the month break. I don't know, once again, whether that's just Netflix doing that or whether that's just like, no, they needed that time to finish the episodes because, maybe there was still like a lot of post-production stuff they needed to finish up on. So either way, it probably worked to their benefit, especially because it's almost like it's all one overarching story, but they're two halves that are almost like two separate stories that are connected by the overarching thread. It's so interesting, so... I didn't talk about it, but the Marianne situation, like the terrible situation she's in, that's a horror/thriller movie all in its own, that story. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of horror movies/thriller movies that kind of fit that mode, but all the while this is all happening, we had the whole situation with Kate trying to help out, with the whole Phoebe situation. Yeah, her situation's getting more and more dire. It's like, dude, it's like, once again, Adam was like, he's kind of a douchey prick like everyone else, but it's like, man, the more Adam, it's like, ever since last episode, it's like, oh, he's garbage. He's an even more garbage human being than you thought. You're like, oh, dude, he's super going to end up dead by the end of this. Oh, and you're like, he's going to kind of deserve it. Once again, whether it's going to be Kate who does it, whether it's going to be Kate reaching out to her father to end up having that done or having that whole Phoebe situation fixed, or whether Joe does it as a show of love and for Kate. But at the end of the day, Kate's trying to get Phoebe to kind of back out of this, and because it turns out her engagement party is actually going to be the wedding. But it's like, no, you planned it out. You're going to wear your grandmother's dress. It's like, yeah, but there's no time because they have to rush because Adam's pushing her. Because she's in a fragile state, or her friends keep dying around her, and it's like, right, if I don't do this, like, we might as well jump on it right now because he loves me. He says it a million times a day, and who knows what's going to happen. And Gemma, she's just the latest person to die, but like, anything could happen. Plus, it doesn't help that Adam's like, she's in a fragile state, and Adam's taking advantage of that. Once again, just makes him even more of a garbage human being. And so it's like, right, at the very least, if you're going to go through this, do it right, get a prenup and stuff. But like, Adam shows up because he's probably making sure that Phoebe's never too far away, because he also doesn't want to take the chance that like Kate might be able to kind of reason with her. So it's like, hey, no prenups. Oh, why is it every time you're around Kate that Phoebe gets more upset, and just the way he looks back at her, it's like, oh, dude, you're so gonna die. And I'm like, oh, dude, you're gonna get it super hard. Once again, I don't know if it's gonna be Tom who does it, and I don't know if it's gonna be, or is it gonna be Joe who does it, or maybe even Kate herself. That's what I thought last episode, but we'll have to wait and see. So that's kind of a back burner thing that I'm sure is gonna come more to the forefront soon enough. But other than that, we had this, circling back. Nadia happens to show up, trying to help Marion, which is, oh boy, kind of comes at the worst possible time, considering the fact is that Joe is there at that time. So Nadia's like, I got a plan, and it's kind of crazy, and it probably won't work. So Joe's there, but Joe is as himself, with the realization of, oh, I actually did all this, so what happens now? Especially because Marion's not going to believe you, because she tried to believe you over and over again. She actually was like, oh, I can't believe the fox let me go. And then it's like, nope, it was a trick. And then later on, oh, I was so thirsty, but it was a trick. He had drugged the water. So, she's not going to believe Joe even in this regard, even if he is being sincere. Once again, it is from our perspective. The camera can lie on this show, as we've said. I mean, the show's always been honest about who Joe was, but this season it tried to paint him in a different brush, a different way. But now it's like, no, we kind of see you for who you are in this moment, Joe. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. Only 2 episodes left, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the penultimate episode of the season. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.